Warning, this review will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen these specials yet, go and watch them first. If you decide to go on ahead regardless and not heed this warning, then it's your own fault, so you have no right to blame me in any capacity if you get angry. The main show has decided to flick its major feature film switch on, so as a result the Equestria Girls franchise had to scale it back, going from one big feature-length film to 3 specials combined that would equate to that same time frame. But speaking of which, it's a very specific question to ask. Can these specials deliver in 22 minutes what a film could do in 75? This is a relevant question to ask because even with that much time at their disposal, some of the films could not deliver much of value in some of the categories I rate. So with an episodic time frame at hand, I'm not certain that they'll actually manage to do any better than they have done. Because even some of the main show episodes with the same time frame get it wrong and end up being nothing more than really bad as a watching experience. So I don't know how I can expect Equestria Girls to better that given its patchy and inconsistent record. But this is why I'm happy to have the opportunity to analyse these specials, as it's going to become a very informative litmus test to see if these specials manage to prove in a serial format Equestria Girls can work, securing this franchise a potential decent future for itself. As a result, it's only fair that we tackle these specials one by one and judge how well they did. Now, I would advise you to get a snack or a drink or sit comfortably, because this will probably take a while and there's a good reason for it. We have a lot to cover. We kicked things off with Dance Magic, and even though it felt like a retreading of Season 4's Rarity Takes Manhattan, its focus on other artistic and media endeavours, its changed morals, and an ending actually having a proper conclusion this time, it ensured that it did feel not as stale as it would have done if it would have taken another path, and it gave it some focus despite losing some originality points right out of the gate. The story of the Wonderbolts and the Shadow Cults going against each other once again allowed continuity from friendship games to be established, and through the resolution of the conflict that dominated proceedings, ensured that Crystal Prep's competitive culture will not be so intense the next time these schools meet, as a message of collaboration instead of competition and argumentation allowed the fractured loose ends of friendship games to be tied up nicely, while a secondary message about it not being okay to steal from others' creative ideas may have been infantilized in execution beyond all sense of belief, but alongside its brethren delivered a solid lesson for creators alike, something that should be attested to by all in a creative, artistic and production-based medium, because it actually showed that if they managed to get down to the root of their problems, they could solve the story conflict amicably. Now, those messages are not the most impactful, not just due to their stilted delivery, but also because after a first watch, the actions of the characters are so easily foreshadowable, it's about as transparent as windows on cleaning day, which really doesn't make them stand as proudly as the quality of the messages themselves allows them to do, which is quite disappointing. On the other hand, the story's tone was kept as just about as consistent as possible, with the conflict between Rarity and the Shadow Bolts providing the drama, while Pinky and Spike supplemented it with comedy to lighten the mood, although the dramatic notions got a little bit overbearing on occasion for my tastes, making the comedy, honestly, feel very out of place despite its obvious need to be included. While some aspects of the story lingered longer than others, it still retained its solid pace in spite of dramatic jumps in mood along the way. The story may have been familiar, but it allowed the messages room to breathe and became something good, all the while showing some obvious issues that could have been fixed with a little more care and attention to detail. Already noting the Shadow Bolt's inclusion in this special is important, because it's imperative that we remember how wasted they were in friendship games. So this gives us an opportunity to see how they can develop their linear personalities into something more. Well, that's at least what I was expecting going into this. So did the writers manage to do it? It's a mixed yes and no as far as I'm concerned. The already noted messages helped redefine their attitude towards competitiveness, which is great for their development, while seeing how the pressure of their school's life and code of moral conduct affected them personally was a very nice touch to flesh out what friendship games never really alluded to outside of Sci-Twi, because she was the damn anomaly the first time round. However, even with 4 of the 5 Shadow Bolts being key to the story, they still weren't explored in more depth, which was a major disappointment to me, as they still felt as limp as they were in the film, even with a little more to them once the credits rolled. And on top of that, the voice acting from all minus Rarity in this special was sparse in its ability to really strike a chord, as the conflict was more important than the variance in vocal delivery. Then again, if the Shadow Bolts didn't manage to benefit from this special much, it was to Rarity's gain, as her shallow, fashion-driven personality, which has been there since the beginning, was expanded on from a creative standpoint, as the entire production process forced her emotional spectrum to be unveiled in supreme style. She was super serious, playfully excited, driven, heartbroken, and open, and it showcased her as a more developed character than any of the prior films did. The rest of the cast supported her drama with the already noted comedy to really give their fleeting appearances some spark, in particular from Pinkie Pie, with that hand-drawn idea visualization being hands down one of the funniest things I've ever seen in the entire ML3 franchise proper. Seriously, I bust a gut watching this. It was utterly brilliant. And speaking of the animation, it had a lot to offer, starting with new attires from the musical number and a smart yet cute permanent change for Sci-Twi, alongside Rarity's insane amount of amazing facial expressions, because seriously, who else is going to pull all that off? And of course, the noted video visualizations offering a change in scenery alongside the most varied use of locations in the Equestria Girls chronology to date, as Crystal Prep, Canterlot High, the Mall, and Rarity's room all got showcased, ensuring that wherever you were, there was something to keep your eyes on. However, they were all dwarfed by the majesty that was dance magic, which took your cake and ate it in front of your crying face as this special blew its figurative load all over you. Please not take that the wrong way. It had crisp editing, great effects and transitions, all with a good use of lighting, colourful backgrounds, and its elaborate stage designs to make it really feel like a big deal. In fact, much bigger than the amateur dance and music competition that, honestly, this was actually happening with. And no wonder they won, because it probably smashed the rest of the competitors out of the damn water. However, if you were to take dance magic out of the equation, then both the music and animation categories would have suffered greatly, as the animation had lingering issues around static camera work and a lack of transitions outside of the musical extravaganza, which made everything feel limp despite the sparkle that was occasionally given to it. And hell, without the musical number, a stark lack of background music left my ears pining for the fjords, as it would have most certainly been as dead as a parrot without this song being present. And in no uncertain terms, this song saved 2 aspects of this special from bringing the whole ship down. And while I'm relieved, it's a worrying thing to note, as it makes me concerned about whether the other 2 have an ace up their sleeve in case they fall under similar pretenses. You know what's funny is that Dance Magic the song is not an original composition for this special. You'd think so because it's bloody well named after it, but no. It was actually included on the Friendship Games soundtrack album and lay dormant for 2 years before they stuck it into here. Now, I am perfectly okay with them taking some already noticeable assets and sticking it into a project like this, but I would have liked something more original. Then again, I hadn't heard the song up until this special, so my opinion of it is pretty vanilla, and I loved it all the same regardless. Now, did it manage to save this special's obvious blushes? Well, I can't come to a resolute conclusion right now, because I still have 2 more to get through. Speaking of which, let's get right into the next one. Movie magic, where lights, camera, action becomes the order of the day, while a classic Scooby-Doo-esque whodunit mystery around stolen film props unfolded before us. However, while that does sound grand, I'm here to bring it down to earth, as it did not fill me with a lot of excitement, as the potential perpetrators, yes, all 2 of them, ensured a limited and lax and not very mentally taxing mystery to be had, as it really didn't provide much entertainment value thanks to how predictable it was. As you know how much work was done to implicate one person over the other. Its tone tried to be serious, but injecting comedy artificially to lift the mood was done, and with extreme malice, as this special could not decide which way they wanted it to go. It could have been fun and tense if done right, but it didn't seem to achieve any of it while unashamedly struggling in similar fashion to control its tempo, with a struggling slow pace lumbering everything into a joyless sight to behold. Hell, you'd think the mystery could be padded out with even more just to give it some life. But no, instead we got nods to the main series in setting and costume designs, as the story ended on an anticlimax, as Juniper Montage was unveiled as the culprit, which was no surprise at all given the context. But in a surprising turn of events, she turned out to be this special's best element, in her staunchly fleeting appearances, as the themes of jealousy, exclusion, and the collective destruction of small actions helped to develop her sweet yet cunning demeanour, as it gave the plot some extra foundation and the theft some added punch to add some polish to a character that I honestly didn't think too much of going in. As for the other two new characters, Chestnut Magnifico and Cantor Zoom, they didn't really bring much to the table outside of a diva stereotype and an excuse to be an exposition dump respectively. As for our main seven, outside of some fangirling by the resident Daring Do fans in Sci-Twi and Rainbow, which I absolutely loved by the way, there wasn't too much to report on it either, but I will give credit to the writers for reminding people that Pinkie Pie loves pudding as much as she does frosting. Ugh, good, I will let you all take that whichever way you want. While Sci-Twi managed to ensure the plot resolved itself through that smart brain of hers, while the geodes that gave them powers in Legend of Everfree got put to practical use, which was something that I kept wondering about post-film, and it was really good to see it happen. Speaking of which, I do have to give some extra credit to this film for being directly tied up continuity-wise to the events of Legend of Everfree, because without it, this amazing reward for our heroines would not have been opened up for them. Then again, the fact that this had to be done is somewhat confusing and feels a little weak, when you question what else could have led these characters to the film studio and a role within the film itself in the first place, making that continuity feel slightly out of place and shoehorned when you put your mind to it, no matter how fantastic it is for the story's sake. It seems that my positives are often followed by a slew of negatives whenever one is brought to the forefront, and there is a good reason for this. The special is doing okay. But in doing okay, it's going along at a steady pace without bite, forethought, and depth. And honestly, it makes me consider to myself, where the blue hell is this plot going? It's assured of itself, but it's not really doing anything to wow me. And when it compounds itself with really weak voice acting, you know it's not doing that well. In fact, you know what, this reminds me of Rainbow Rocks. It has a concept, it's doing the minimal it can to go forward with it, but unlike its film counterpart, this special does not have musical numbers to save its own ass. And on top of that, there's something missing from this special that I couldn't keep my eyes or ears away from noticing. It is missing a freaking moral. Because the events of this special carry over into the subsequent one, the writers felt the need to not outline a moral in the traditional way. Because seriously, what is the point of stuffing a message in here when they can resolve it the next time, right? Now, I usually go to the friendship lessons page on the MLP wiki to note what the message is there to use against the message category for analysis purposes. This time, however, I had nothing to work off of, and there is nothing worse than having to search through an episode's transcript and watch it multiple times over just to see what message I could get from it. The main show has only done this roughly 2 or 3 times in its 7-year run, and I'm immensely happy with that. On a feature, or even on an Equestria Girls level, however, I expect to find something. In this case, I was left very irritated. But no need to fear, there was a message to be found in there somewhere. A moral about not letting your jealousy tarnish your reputation. It's a great life lesson and once again benefits Juniper's character going forward, especially considering that the events of the third special are to come. It's warranted. However, the fact that I even had to look out for one on my own is not good at all, and the fact that it was not even on the cards until the final few moments of the special did not help it win any extra points. I will give credit where it's due for the development and quality of the message itself, but it's not enough to generate much more from me, and my disappointment does not end there, as the music was distinctly lacking throughout, even though it did have its occasional moments to shine, with the sleuthing jazz piece when they were sneaking around the studio, the bouncing accompaniment to the split-screen montage, and the brief accents to scenes always do make me smile, but that was it. So to have a small amount of minimalist parts that could barely stretch out to cover its own ass across the whole runtime was not good enough. And on top of that, the animation didn't fare much better, and I do appreciate the detailing and the fan service of dedicating backgrounds and foreground visuals to the Power Ponies and Daring Do, as well as taking a good use of effects and working it into a lovely scene, alongside a really nice Sci-Twi walking transition when her conclusion came through, and Chestnut Magnifico and Juniper Montage's designs, and a nice feather mask to the scene filming at the end. It was a nice bounty, but not enough to satisfy even the hungriest of animation lovers like myself. Thanks to being in a film studio, the colour palette, while vibrant, was dull and lifeless whenever they were off the sets. While that is obvious, it did detract from everything, as not enough creativity and scope was noted. Your special is in a film studio. It would not have hurt to have dedicated some time to either making a nod to or parodying films or filmmakers to give this more to work with. Hell, what exemplifies this more than anything is that they use the same clapper transition 5 freaking times. The first time, I found it quirky, cute, and great, but by the end, I realised how tired this was, all thanks to that one transition. It kind of set my mood for this entire special with itself, because it was happy with what minimal work it had done and decided to put its feet up and just let it get on with it. And I'm sure alternate takes were needed to get the perfect shot, because as far as this reviewer and production professional is concerned, it just wasn't good enough. I saw a lot of potential coming from this special, primarily due to its location, because a film studio should have allowed for something fun and exciting to happen. But what we got was something tepid, cumbersome, and remarkably simple, to the point where it bordered on insulting at times. It may have had a few good points, and it may have had a major piece of character writing to its name, but when all is said and done, it's not going to reflect well on the bounty of negatives that I found in its basket. Now, we still have one more special to get through, and I'm hoping it takes one good, long, hard look at itself in the mirror and decides what it does, because if it manages to make as many mistakes as this one did, there's no turning back. We've now reached Mirror Magic, and immediately this sticks out for one major reason: Sunset returning to Ponyville. And in even bigger news, she brought Starlight Glimmer back with her. And while I am really happy that we saw this come to pass, I wish it had happened on a bigger stage, such as a feature film, so the magnitude of it could be felt, while also allowing it time to have more emotion and grow organically rather than be forced by running out of paper in her magic book. It really doesn't have a lot of depth to it, does it? And not just that, when you're trying to balance this massive occurrence with Juniper's fight against the main 7, you can't have both feeling a similar magnitude. Because when the former is needed to be saved for something more, it really means that putting them both on an equal pedestal makes this entire story feel disjointed. However, while that is indeed the case, the special did its best to accommodate them all the same, as continuity somehow tied all of these specials together, Juniper got fired from the studio, obviously linking it back to the second one, and then of course she saw the damn dance magic video from the first one. That, ladies and gentlemen, is continuity and attention to detail that I cannot discount at any price. And directly following alongside it, the story did its best to try and retain balance, as a consistent pace allowed for tension to build on both sides of the plot divide as they both crossed paths well, while some elements of comedy were slid in to break up the tonal monotony, and by including Starlight Glimmer this felt quite fresh, as she had to tackle the now corrupted Juniper with her blunt and astute approach to things rather than a preachy one that Twilight or Sunset would have done, especially as she was peaking from past experiences that had happened on the show, which is lovely in its own right. Now, speaking of Juniper, while her descent into magically corrupted madness did wonders for the morals of how revenge doesn't solve problems that you caused, as well as fame distorting reality, not being emblematic of the shallow hole it leaves you in, was fantastic alongside the whole rounded nature of her character development reaching its apex when she's brought back to reality, a reluctant and neglected soul. It made the ending of this special feel worth the time, as her presence felt surprisingly childish, in contrast, and not in the least bit as domineering as the writers would have wanted her to come across as. Sticks and stones, I guess, especially when I am reminded that all of these problems she had caused were her own fault. And in the broader picture, her issues with life do not compare to the magic that is slowly overtaking her and the world around her, as well as the rest of the cast, with her fight not feeling as intense as it's built up to be, and it was rushed trying to battle with Sunset and Starlight's escapades earlier on, which is not nice to see. Now, speaking of Sunset, her development across the entire Equestria Girls franchise was already great, but it added another feather to its cap here, by showing her worry about the effect magic will now have on her home, which tied well into a great message about not worrying too much about the future to stop enjoying the present, while through showing immense patience and accommodation towards Starlight, she treated her with respect, and given her lack of knowledge about the world, it was something that Twilight could have desperately needed the first time round. And hell, even if it wasn't through her own choice, she ended up not being the centre of attention, which was great to see too. Now, the rest of the main characters outside of those three I've already noted were about as fickle and as bland as you would expect, because it wasn't about them, and it made their lack of presence known, which goes the same way with the voice acting too. All in all, while this special seemingly had more on its plate than it honestly had any right to, it held it with more vigour and determination than I expected, even though it wasn't the cleanest of jobs at the same time. Its lack of finesse is profoundly apparent in its bluntest form when you look at how long it took Starlight Glimmer to adjust to the human world. Do you know how long it took? 10 minutes of time in this special for that. Do you know how long it took Twilight to do the same? 25 minutes of a 75-minute feature film where, unlike Starlight, the entire time it was focused on her, and we got to see all those embarrassing, cringeworthy moments that I hate so much. And okay, I understand that Starlight has Sunset Shimmer to help her, and of course, not focusing on her all the time once she enters means it actually worked out okay. But here's my problem. What in the blue hell was the point of seeing Twilight go through all of that crap when we can just see Starlight hitting the ball out of the park on her first try? It really doesn't make any sense, and for me personally, it verifies my claim that this part of the story should have been its own standalone feature, because with Starlight reacting alongside Sunset, it would have actually been quite comedic, not this cringeworthy, incredibly uncomfortable thing that the original Equestria Girls film had for itself. On top of all of that, the lack of polish also extends to its stylistic front. And while an effort was made, it wasn't as good as it honestly could have been. I've already made note of how these three impactful messages affected and drew out good character development, but that comes at a massive cost to the message's collective quality as a whole, as not having one in movie magic meant they had to shoehorn more moral substance into this one. As they battled out for space that just wasn't there, it felt quite crowded, which in turn caused one of Juniper's messages that she had to resonate more than the other, especially as her character had such a quick turnaround. which made me not believe she'd truly learned her lesson as far as I was concerned, which as a result made the efforts of these specials feel wasted in retrospect. Now, I understand why this was done, to allow Juniper some growth if she was featured in another special or another film, but to do it at the expense of the overall category's health? Yeah, I don't understand the reasoning behind that, and it feels odd in real certain terms. It could have been done a lot smoother. However, on the animation front, in contrast, there were some nice large elements to get me excited, especially relating to the warp effects and the void within the mirror, alongside the streams from the geodes, to give combined expansive and limited space to the possessed artifact, and cool colour to contrast the bland mall setting that did not offer much on its own, while Starlight's cute punk aesthetic was definitely different from the norm in terms of human character designs we've seen before. As for Juniper, her cute work uniform was lovely, but it completely contrasted with the terrifying actress form she envisioned and ended up becoming. Because when it was combined with her actions, which flared up my anxieties of social interaction going wrong to no end, it scared the crap out of me. And of course that means the writers and animators paired well to ensure that it worked. Well done, guys! Also, there was a Pac-Man-esque transition too, which made me leap out of my seat in joy. That all sounds great, but when you put things into context across the whole special, these elements, while they were big, often left the rest of it feeling surprisingly empty and lacking in depth. And while they did go a long way, I would have expected more, because when you boil it down, all we are left with is some new designs and outfits, as well as a couple of nice effects. They were good, but it doesn't stack up to much when all is said and done. And in more amazing terms, the music fared worse, as outside of the distinct lack of sound inside the mirror, which makes me, a person who loves non-diegetic sound, so beautiful, I feel that was literally all it had, alongside a few accents. The sound was distinctly lacking, with the visuals failing to overwhelm it and mask over its problems, making this special feel more abundant with character work than visuals or audible pizzazz, which at the end of the day means that while it comes home bringing me potential for this franchise going forward, it let me down on two of its fundamental stylistic fields, and I don't know whether I'm more disappointed in that or the other negatives I found in an otherwise solid offering. These specials, at the end of the day, were quite eye-opening, and there was a good reason for it, because while they showcased what an Equestria Girls series could look like, something that I never really envisioned, that's definitely a good thing. But on the opposite end of things, it also highlighted a very vulnerable underbelly that still needs a lot of work to reap the benefits from. Now, honestly, if this was a test in quality control, based on the results here, I would have taken this batch off the production line and started again from scratch. All three of these specials did things that were right and wrong. But what I can't get away from is no matter how decently they connected through the thinnest threads of continuity you have probably ever seen, they fluctuated in quality so much, yet somehow remained remarkably close to each other. It's unfathomable. Dance Magic, had it not been for the eponymous song it was named for, would have floundered unspectacularly. Movie Magic failed to make itself remotely exciting despite a plethora of creative opportunities at its disposal, and Mirror Magic tried to compensate for that by doing too much in the limited runtime to really make it come out in any semblance of quality to a certain degree. Now, all three suffered under that limited time frame as it stopped scope and depth from expanding in its gaps. But I can say that it wasn't entirely without promise, as Dance Magic provided drama and resolution to one of Friendship Game's conflicts, Movie Magic established a new character with momentum straight off the bat, while Mirror Magic had character development for 3 different characters and had tense action that the others were missing. That being said though, when you look at these 3 as a group, the differences may not be as massive as they work together to form a solid but underperforming entity. Individually, however, it is very easy to see which ones managed to do better than the others. We didn't get any massive successes or hell, even an out-and-out great one. But I guess that's what happens when an exercise like this exists, primarily to see what could be done. You hold your cards close to your chest and judge on the results of the tests before doing something more outlandish in the future once you know that the formula works. I would say it's a decent start with imperfections abound that could be worked on, but I do want to see better if we are able to make a Equestria Girls series, because it's still a tantalising prospect if executed properly. And while this lot did have their good moments, I'm not holding my head high enough to believe that the momentum of these specials could be bettered in a way that delivers a much more satisfying product than what we got here, in spite of what good things it managed to push in front of me. Individually, Dance Magic scored a total of 14 out of 25, Movie Magic a 7 out of 25, and Mirror Magic an 11 out of 25, which is a C+, D-, and C- respectively. Meaning overall, the combined and rounded out average for all three in this set is an 11 out of 25, which is a C-. In closing, I am quite conflicted about these specials, because while there were some good things that kept me interested and entertained, there were so many needless negatives. So many things that would have been easily salvageable with the right hands, so easily rectifiable if they had enough care and attention to detail given to them. And honestly, while there are some positives to be taken, I don't feel that a full-blown Equestria Girls series is technically doable yet. Because at the end of the day, to have this much work needed to be done to make it, in my opinion, satisfactory, good, is quite daunting. Because there needs to be a lot of work done to sand out those rough edges, to fine-tune all of these problems and get it working as a cohesive unit. Because if it doesn't manage to do that, the series will arrive dead before it has any chance to make an impact. And honestly, some of you are probably thinking, you gave Dance Magic a 14, which in your scale, Fred, is above average just. There is no way you can really be angry at that. Well, I can, because if you take away the musical number that this special was named after, it's a 9. Which is definitely poor, definitely below average, and it slots right in between the other two, which rank a 7 and an 11 respectively. Like, this is the problem. If you take certain parts away from some, and then add them to the rest, you'd have a much more beneficial, unified product. But we don't get that. And that's disappointing. And while I am still looking forward to the potential of a series, I just don't think it's going to be anywhere near what I want it to be. And to hear that we have 45 individual episodes being released across a year on Hasbro's YouTube channel starting in less than a month, on November 17th, I don't know what to think. I'll either see this series crash and burn or rise above potential peril. And you know what? I'm just going to leave it on a cliffhanger because I really do not know what to expect from it. And with that, Equestria Girls Month is nearly at its conclusion, as pretty much everything of major note has been reviewed, except for the songs, as it's now time to see what came out on top, bursting through this bountiful musical war chest that the filmography has bequeathed to me, because as we've seen today, without those musical numbers on offer, we would be missing what gives these animated properties their vibrancy. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this has been the Discovery Family TV Specials Review as part of Equestria Girls Month for the CC Network. And I will see you all next time.